Hello, everyone. I am Duran Young, founder of Black Therapist Rock, and also a licensed clinical social worker. I am a trauma specialist by training and trade, and I am going to make sure I share this video. I wanted to make sure it was public because I feel like this is a message that most of us need, and I know I needed once upon a time. And it's something that I believe is a very powerful message and can change a lot of lives or help a lot of people grow both personally and professionally. So I'm going to make sure that I am sharing this to my avenues, my formats, and I would like for you all to share it as well. So if you could hit the share button, that's what I'm doing, hit the share button, copy and paste it to your favorite places, whether it be a group. You can copy and paste it to your personal page. It is public. This is not therapy. This is just education, prevention-based education that I think is necessary and critical. So let me continue to paste this in all the places that I would like for it to show up. Bear with me. Technology, I tell you, doesn't always work out the way we want it. Bear with me. Okay, I think I'm in the right place now, finally. There we go. Okay, so now everyone should be able to find me. And the discussion for today is 3 subtle ways that trauma is stealing your success and ruining your life, basically. And the primary ways that I've seen it, both personally in my own life and professionally as someone who does this work, is in 3 areas: trust, control, and self-esteem. And I'm going to explain a little bit about what I mean as it relates to those 3 areas and some examples of what that might look like. But as you come in, please tell us who you are, where you're watching from, just so that I know who my audience is, because I try not to talk to myself. We know in this field, that's kind of a thing that we try to steer away from, right? So as a trauma specialist and as a therapist, I'd rather not talk to myself. Hi, Ebony. Yes, please come in and say hello just so I can know who's out there. Again, so we're having a very critical conversation today. This is something that's been on my heart and on my mind to discuss. And I'm going to share a little bit of self-disclosure along the way, because I feel like it's important for people to know and to share our experiences. And I'll talk about that as well. What happens when we share our experiences and when we tell our story. I was recently writing a book, and it will launch actually in October. And the title of the book is called Unchain Me Mama. And that was very freeing for me because I thought it would be the last topic that I discussed. And it ended up being my very first topic as an author. So I'm really excited about that book and excited about other people being able to tell their story as a result of reading it. Hi, Kalila. So yeah, I'm not going to shout out too many people because this is public, and just in case you don't want anybody to know that you're watching, a little bit of privacy is always good. But I just wanted to expand on the conversations that we've been having in our group this week and to share it with the world, because I feel like it does impact a lot of people. It's estimated that at least 85% of all sexual abuse victims suffer with some symptoms of PTSD. And I would say that that's probably a lot higher because most of us never report it. Most of us never get to a place where we're comfortable to openly talk about what's happened to us and to share our story because of the shame and the silence that's involved around these type of experiences, right? So and then even with that being said, child abuse is very, very common. I think it's more common than we'd like to admit. And primarily when I think of child abuse, I think of emotional abuse, because as a clinician, that's the most common form that I've seen. And what I actually see is that most people want to minimize that because, it wasn't like I went hungry, or it wasn't like my parents, abandoned me, or, physically. even maybe emotionally they did. But often people just completely minimize the fact that their parents were emotionally detached or not available for them to, experience their emotions with. A child didn't have anybody to guide them through their emotions, and they were kind of left alone with these adult-like emotions and not having any way to know how to process them, right? And we now know that that's very dangerous. That could be, it can leave a lot of room for a child to start to question themselves. That's often what happens. And we know that children need answers. They're not, sometimes we see them as, people who aren't people. And I always call them little humans because they are that. They are little us, And so they have a lot of the same feelings and the same needs that we have. And usually they're more intense because they're new to the world. They're new to this whole thing. Right? So they need more answers. They need more guidance. They need more direction, and they need more attention than most adults require. And when they don't get it, it shows up later in their adult life. And so what I was saying is, when children don't get answers, they make them up, because kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. They're a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And being a mom now, I realize just how smart and how quickly their brains work. They learn real fast. They grab onto things, and it's something that you may not even know you were teaching them, but just by your behavior or your emotions or your body language, they learn so much. And so when things are chaotic in the home or in life in general, and they're not being given a chance to express themselves about it, they're not being asked how they feel, they're not being told, why things are going on, then they make them up and they assume that everything is about them. Because as a child should, their life is typically supposed to be about them. And so they just assume that, my parents are taking care of me, they're doing what they're supposed to do, and there's something I'm not doing. This happened because of me. There's something along the way that says I'm bad, or I did something wrong, or I failed to do something. I should have known. I should have taken care of this. And we often put them in the role of adult. We give them some very adult responsibilities. So I'll share my own personal experience if everyone's okay with that. Because I feel like I said before, it's important for us to speak these things and to know exactly how they look. Right? So I don't mind using myself as an example if it helps somebody else. So growing up for me, I was, the oldest daughter of a mother who is mentally ill, and also struggled with substance abuse. So from the age of probably around 3, I can remember being left home alone with my 2 younger daughters. So if I was 3, I'm thinking my middle sister, who's just a year younger than me, almost exactly a year younger than me, she was 2, and I believe my baby sister was either like, and maybe my timeline is off because that's the other thing about trauma. Trauma impacts your memory. So if you have a hard time remembering things about your childhood, it's probably because you had a lot of trauma. If there seems to be long gaps and you can't pinpoint how old you were when certain things happened, it's probably because your brain was impacted by trauma, which has been the case for me. I try to go back and I try to pinpoint songs that were out. If I can remember a song, I'll go back and see when that song came out to see about what age I was. The grades are a blur because we moved around so much, and, we weren't able to establish bonds or ties to any place or anything. And so those are things that kids need. We know that children need structure, they need routine. And when they don't get that, it shapes their brain and their thinking. And it shapes the way they see themselves, the way they see the world, and the way they interact with other people in the world. And like I said, we're going to get to how that impacts them as adults as well in so many different ways. But for me personally, I grew up kind of in a fog, and I now know, and a lot of clinicians have this very poor interpretation of dissociation. We think that it means that you're completely in a whole nother world, you're not aware of yourself at all, but it's a continuum. So there's a level of dissociation. But at the basic sense, dissociation is disconnecting from yourself, your needs, and where you are in the world currently. And so it can be very subtle. For me, it could look like, disconnecting from my own needs to give someone else what they need, completely minimizing myself to focus on someone else. And so that is actually a defense mechanism, and it comes from childhood. We got really, really good at it in childhood because we weren't allowed. It wasn't safe for us to have a need. It wasn't safe for us to express our feelings. So we just become used to it. It's a habit. And when we get older, that's a very difficult thing to change. But it's a very crucial thing to change because you have needs that need to be met. And as an adult, you shouldn't, still be relying on your parents to meet your needs. So you have to be an independent person and be able to voice what your needs are, and then make sure that you're in a place to get them met, that you're in a safe place, you're around safe people who love and care about you, and they care about your needs and what your emotional needs are, what your physical needs are, your physical boundaries. All those things are extremely important to your psyche. And so over the years, I've had to learn these things, kind of through education and through my personal life. And I'm thankful for these experiences now. I think when you resolve your traumas, that's how you know that you're really at a place of peace, that you can look back and say, I am so thankful that happened to me. And I never thought I'd be able to say that. I mean, that almost sounds crazy. Like, who would be thankful that this awful, horrible thing happened to you and it shaped your life forever? But I believe there's also, once you learn the lessons tied to those traumas, there are some very valuable learning experiences that come from it. You learn to be more truly resilient. And a lot of us see resilience as bouncing back, right? But sometimes we get so busy bouncing back that we don't want to face the pain to actually learn from it. Has anybody else ever experienced that there's certain things that you don't want to think about, you don't want to talk about, we can't go there, that's not allowed, there's certain topics that are just off limits, and that's because it's a sore spot. And what typically happens with those sore spots is they pop up all around you without you being aware of it. Like I said, your fears live in your subconscious, and that's why you can't cure them yourself. Like, I thought, I'll just go into the field and I'll cure myself. And, I know all this stuff. Like, I'm a trauma specialist. For years, I've been able to help other women overcome their traumas, especially sexual trauma. That was where most of my work was. I did women's trauma groups, and primarily it was sexual trauma or childhood trauma, domestic violence, things of that nature. So I knew it like the back of my hand. But because it's in my own subconscious, and for me personally, I can't reach that. I need someone outside of me to help me access those feelings, those thoughts that I'm not aware. You don't know what you don't know, right? So that's why we need others. And what trauma actually does a lot of times is it isolates you. As I said before, it silences you, it shames you, and it also isolates you. It makes you feel unworthy of having a voice, unworthy of other people's attention or time or energy. Oh, this isn't worth anything. This is not a big deal. I'm just going to keep moving forward. I don't need to focus on that. It's almost like you make yourself unimportant for your entire life, right? And that's what I did for a long time. I just brushed things off, tried to keep moving. And I would say some of the most guilty people are us high achieving people. We get so focused on doing that we don't know how to just be. We don't know how to be a human being because we are a human doing. We are so busy being successful, but at the same time, what we're really doing is trying to avoid failure at all costs. It's like, I can't end up like so-and-so. I can't mess up like so-and-so. If I do that, that's the end of the world. If I let this happen, that would just be the end of me. And we become very perfectionistic. We become overachieving, and we lose our all sense of balance. All sense of balance just goes out the window because we're living in fear. We're not living our true life. We're living a life of fear. And I can say that was me for at least 30 plus years. And like today, I'm super excited because it's my birthday. And I'm choosing to spend my birthday doing this because before, in previous years, I would get depressed, every time it was my birthday because I wasn't where I thought I should be in life. It's like, oh, well, I am supposed to have achieved this. I was supposed to I had it all figured out, y'all. By the age of 28, I was supposed to be married and at least, or at least engaged and have, someone that I could have children with. And I thought I was a complete failure on my 27th birthday when I didn't even have a boyfriend. I will never forget that because I look back at that now and I'm like, that's the whole part of trauma that really ruins things for us. That sense of trust, and that I'll start with the sense of control, because that was one of the things I really struggled with. The people who know me and have known me for a long time, and I'm going to try to keep this short-ish, but I really want to make sure that this message get across to as many people as possible, because I really believe that it will free some people up to really live, to be successful both personally and professionally, and to live and be free. But I'll start with control, because I that's where I see the most issues. Like, we don't want to fail. We can't trust when people say trust the process, it's like, for what? Like, I need to trust myself. I can only trust me. That's what control tells you, that no one else is safe. No one else can be counted on. And I can only trust me. I'm the only trustworthy person. I'm the only stable thing in my life. So I need to control everything. I need to have be able to dictate and have a plan and prepare and contingency, plans and a backup to the backup. And you spend your whole life planning for what if. And those what ifs are usually not even that likely to happen. And so I ask people, what's the worst thing that might happen? Because I realize for me, when I, acknowledge what I think the worst thing might be, okay, I might end up homeless. How likely is that? And I realize just how emotional my decision making is at that time, right? And you can't make decisions from a purely emotional place, especially when it's in a place of fear. But it is better to understand those emotions. Like, you really have to understand the patterns of your thinking and the patterns of the way you feel and the way you experience life. That's what's really important. And if you're not acknowledging your feelings, then you can't learn from them. You can't grow and understand who you are as a person, as an individual, unique being, right? So, yeah, I think that that's where we really learn and thrive and grow, is in our emotional experiences. But a lot of times we're like, oh, no, I don't want to feel that. Like, that's painful. Of course, your brain wants to protect you. The brain is created to help you survive. And an emotional, painful experience is like a dangerous attack against your brain. So being human, your brain wants to protect you from all painfully emotional experiences. And so we come up with all these defense mechanisms, and we're really creative. They look different on surface level. They look different from each person. If you haven't experienced it, or if you're not trained in it, people can't see. They'll think, oh, that person's doing great. They're living a wonderful life. People might even envy you, like me. People envied me, and I'm like, if they only knew. When people say, oh, well, you really accomplished so much, and you've gone so far despite your experiences, I tell them it comes at a cost. Every person's life comes at a cost. It's not like you're not impacted by the things that you experience. And so I feel like none of us should really envy anyone, because you don't know what they've experienced and how they got to where they are. Because oftentimes there's a whole nother story that we're just not aware of. But those insecurities that we have, those fears that we have, they really get in the way when you want to be truly professional, when you want to go to a higher level in your success. You have to come to terms with these things. So for me, like I said, the control issue, like wanting to plan everything and have everything figured out, I couldn't focus on what I was called to do. I couldn't be great because I was so worried about being worried, if that makes sense. So control, is something that steals a lot of people's joy, and it steals a lot of our success, and it steals your relationships. Because who wants to be around you when you're constantly anxious? And that rubs off. It makes me anxious when you're anxious. It's like, I'm not worried, but should I be worried? And then it makes the person that's with you question themselves, like, why am I? When you have two traumatic people who have been traumatized, and like I said, I think most of us have in some way. But when you get two people who've been traumatized and one is anxious, they're like, oh, well, what does that say about me? Because everything in our life says something about us, to our brain anyway, right? So I just wanted to talk about that control issue just to start off, because one thing that helped me overcome that, I will say, lots and lots of treatment, of course, lots and lots of therapy. I am a huge proponent of therapy. People think you go to therapy because you're crazy. I think you go to therapy to not be crazy. Because if you wait till you're like, why would you wait till you're completely broken to go get help? That's crazy. But one of the things that a mentor said to me that really helped me overcome the constant fear and the need to be in control, she said, why do you think the creator loves you so much? Well, first she asked me, do you think we have a creator who loves you? And I said, oh, absolutely. You know, he helped me get through the things that I experienced. He helped me get through the years of sexual abuse, the recent sexual trauma that I went through. I know that there was a creator who helped me survive those things, right? And that the reason why I am where I am today and thriving despite those things, right? So she asked me if I believed that there was a creator who loved me. And I said, absolutely. And she said, okay, so why do you think he or she, why do you think the creator loves you? And I said, oh, it's because I'm a good person. And she was like, you really think there's something you can do to deserve to be loved? And I had never thought about that. I mean, I've always been someone who was raised in the church and religious, but at the actual core spiritual element, I had never considered that true spirituality has nothing to do with what you do. It has nothing to do with what you do. You can never earn, love or appreciation from the creator. You were born with it. You were created because of it, because he adores us. He or she adores us. And that's why we're actually here, because we are so loved. And when I thought about that, I said, well, why am I running around beating myself up for everything? Trying to be this quote unquote good person. What does that even mean? Who's defining a good person? Who gets to say what that means? So once I was able to kind of, take that cloak of guilt off, I was able to be free and just be myself and, kind of go with the flow of life. It was like, okay, now I can just experience life as it comes and respond to it in the way that I believe I can truly, thrive. And not feel like, oh, I'm supposed to do this, or I should do this, or I can't do this, not feeling those limits, releasing myself from limits. That's what it did. So the control thing to me is like most of our problem. And I hope that helps ease that a little bit. But self-compassion is so important. I always tell people I'm just a human. When people are like, oh, you messed up. Yeah, I did. I'll probably do it again tomorrow. I'm just a human. And I like to give myself so much grace now because I'm learning every day and I'm growing every day, right? And that's what life is about. That's actually what it's all about. So trust, being able to trust other people. Actually, I'm going to leave that one for last because that's another one that we really struggle with. I'm going to go into self-esteem and how control is actually related to our self-esteem. Because what we're saying when we say, I can't fail, I can't allow this to happen, is that I won't survive if that happens. I won't be able to cope with X, Y, and Z if that happens. So you're doubting yourself and you're doubting the person or thing that created you, right? It's as if everything is on you, so it's either like a higher self-inflation of yourself, like you really think you have that much control of life, or it's almost, a completely self-doubting yourself and your ability to cope, to bounce back, to learn, to thrive. When you have self-esteem, that regardless of the situation, you'll be okay. You'll figure it out. We always do, and we have help. We don't have to figure everything out because we have help. We have people around us. I believe that the creator puts experiences and situations and people in our life just for us. Like I feel so spoiled at times. I'm like, it'll work out. Why? Because I'm created to be wonderful. There is someone out there who created the world, the trees, the ocean, all these beautiful things. And they thought enough to create me. And guess what? They're going to make sure I'm okay. So I don't need to worry. And I know that I'm worthy of being okay. I'm worthy of more than just being okay. I'm worthy of actually being wildly successful. And I believe everyone is. Once we realize that, we can actually step into it. It's like once that light bulb clicks and you say, you know what? I am worthy of everything. I am worthy of everything. And whatever is meant for me, I'm going to get it. And I've gotten really radical about it. Like if I told y'all what I've done over the last week, just because I'm like, yeah, that's going to happen. I ask for things And I just assume that it's going to happen. And it's things that most people wouldn't dare ask for. Like, who do you think you are? Well, I think I'm someone that was created to be great. That's who I think I am. And it's wonderful to be in this place. Do I think I'm perfect? No. Do I think I still have a whole lot to learn? Absolutely. And, that's where I'm at today. Like, this is where I'm at today. And this is the thing that I am learning and growing in life. And that's the whole point of life, in my opinion. But self-esteem makes you feel like you're not worthy of certain things, that other people are worthy, but you're not. Anybody ever guilty of that? I was telling somebody the other day that we upgrade everyone else and minimize ourselves. When we think about, this person's so good at that. She's really great at this. But what are you great at? Or when somebody gives you a compliment and says, oh, you're really great at this, or you're amazing, and you have a hard time really letting that sit in and believing it. I struggled with that for years, and it still sometimes is a struggle. I'm not going to, be completely, overly indulgent. Like, we all still struggle. Nobody's exempt from struggles, right? We all have insecurities, but I think when you acknowledge those insecurities and those fears and those struggles, once you know what you're dealing with, you can deal with it, right? When you see it, you're like, oh, okay, I know what that is, and you can respond to it differently because you're aware. But like I said before, you don't become aware of your self-esteem issues by yourself. And when you isolate yourself from everybody else, because that's what trauma makes you want to do, it makes you want to hide and believe that, no one would ever understand you, and that, no one ever would believe you or see you as someone that's worthwhile, because you don't even see those things for yourself, right? But the really sneaky trick about trauma is it will isolate you and make you feel like you are all in the world alone, that nobody cares about you. And to me, that's the most deadly part of it, because when you get in that place, that's where it's extremely harmful to who you are as a person. So I always tell people the best thing to do is just to get out there. I highly, 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 again, encourage seeing a therapist for everything. Why? Because that's somebody who's professionally trained and wants to understand you, wants to help you, sort through life's issues and life's challenges. Other people, you don't know what trauma they have and what trauma issues they're still dealing with, right? And we all, even therapists, we have issues that we're dealing with. And that's usually why we come into the field, right? But I think it's different when they have, they have an objective training, an objective background on the science of how to deal with these things, right? And you don't have to worry about, are they emotionally safe? Like, are they going to try to, do harm? Are they going to intentionally do harm to me? And one of the things that I learned from being in treatment is that when you are someone who's experienced a lot of trauma like myself, you tend to attract people who are extremely unhealthy. Anybody else relate to that? You attract people who are needy or, who drain you, and then you start to be resentful, and you blame them for how you feel about them. And there is another very prominent person in our career field. His name is Dr. Ross Rosenberg. He calls it the self-love deficit disorder. Self-love deficit disorder. And back in the day, it used to be called codependency, when we overly, focus on other people and not on ourselves. We can't be great and be doing our wonderful calling if we're focused on everybody else's, right? But when he explains the self-love deficit disorder, it just really, like, so many light bulbs came on for me. We're actually Facebook friends now, so I think I'm going to tag him in this video. But the way he explains that, you should look up some of his YouTube videos. He has a book called, I wrote it down, Why We Love People Who Hurt Us. And I think I posted something earlier about that, how, when we were growing up, if our parents weren't in tune with us, it was because they were too busy getting their own needs met, right? And oftentimes, a lot of our parents were narcissistic and they weren't aware. We weren't aware at the time, of course, because we weren't therapists. We didn't have all the psychology knowledge, and our parents didn't either. But a lot of our parents were narcissists. It was all about them. I know for my mom, it was, and it's because of her mental illness, that's a symptom of her mental illness. But her whole life and our life was wrapped around what she needed. and it didn't give us time or energy to get what we needed, right? And when you develop that kind of pattern early on, it develops into your personality, into everything, your core beliefs, into your value system, into everything about you, right? So you begin to have a pattern of loving people who hurt you. And I started to look around and it was like, okay, who is my safe person to go and share my emotional experiences with? And I had none. And I think if you start to notice that, it's time to get a therapist, because that can be an emotionally safe person that you can go and share your experience with and get some clarity and get some perspective that's not biased, hopefully, if you have a good therapist, right? I think most of us are coming from a place that's very non-biased, very scientific, and very informed, especially a trauma-informed therapist. If you go to a trauma-informed therapist, then they are going to know exactly how to spot the triggers and the symptoms of your trauma. So speaking of triggers, I will go into my last point about trust, right? So trust and control and self-esteem all go kind of hand in hand, especially trust and control. But with trust, I think that's, again, one of the more important ones, because that's the thing that keeps you isolated, because you feel like you can't trust anyone. And at times you feel like you can't trust yourself, right? And that's when a lot of depressive thoughts can come in, because it's like, well, shoot, if I can't trust myself, what's the point of even trying? I'll share a personal experience. After my divorce, I really felt guilty because I chose that, right? I was like, why did I choose this relationship? That says something about me. That says something about my decision making. That says something about my values. That says something about my identity, that I would completely give up who I was to love someone else. Like I completely changed my identity when I was married. All the things that were me were no longer me. The way I dressed, my religion, the hobbies I had, everything was completely different. And I freely chose those things, I thought. But narcissists they're very sneaky too. And because of our trauma, we are so used to attracting them that we don't even see, the manipulation when it's happening, right? And Dr. Rosenberg, he talks about that a lot as well. The interaction between dependent personalities and narcissistic personalities. So people who have a strong need to be connected and to be fulfilled and esteemed, we often attract people who have no intentions of doing any of that. Right? Doing completely the opposite, right? They just want to control and have their own needs met. They want to feel more important than anything in the world. And that's their need, right? So trust, after that, it was like really difficult to go back out in the world and trust myself, trust my intuition, trust my inner thoughts and my inner voice, trust my emotions. Like, is my emotion real? And that's another symptom or consequence from child sexual abuse, is that for years you thought what you were experiencing, maybe it's not true, maybe it's not happening, and this person is telling me, they're distorting my reality, telling me what I should believe or what should be happening. That if I tell this is going to happen, that's going to happen. So your conceptualization of reality is just all sorted, right? And even with our parents, what we see is what we tend to believe. I used to think that it was normal to go into a grocery store on food stamp day and make a sandwich and eat it in the store before you even checked out. I thought that was normal. There's a lot of things that we learn over our childhood that we think is normal, and then when we get out into the world, we're like, nobody else is doing that. But then it makes you question yourself. And, for some reason, we never question the person we love, because our brain wants to believe that that person is good. Our brain wants to believe that we have someone that we can be emotionally safe with, because we need that. That is a human need, right? And that's why I said it's really good to have a therapist in your life to have that need met, because you're not going to not need it, right? So I'll go through some of the comments as I'm talking about trust, and I want to leave you guys on a very important topic about trust. Worthiness doesn't have prerequisites. Exactly. I feel like owning who we are stories. Exactly. We can't do this thing called life on our own. Absolutely not. I thought I could for a long time, because as the oldest, I always did. I was always required to, like I have to figure it out. And I just did. And I never counted on anybody. And as an adult, and especially at the level of success where I'm at now, I absolutely will not survive if I continue to live in that mentality. If I, choose not to delegate, if I choose not to ask for help, which is a really hard thing for a lot of us, I have to constantly remind myself every day. When someone asks you what they can do to help you, let them. Even if they don't ask them. Let people be there for you. It's really hard when you haven't experienced that, but you have to do it. So I just wanted to kind of go through some of the comments. Exactly. And that's the thing, we can have a lot of insight. We can be really smart. That's what I was talking about, Chastity, earlier. As therapists, we have a whole ton of insight, and we're very, introspective and reflective, and we process everything. And, we're very in tune with our emotions, but you don't know what you don't know. Somebody outside of you has to be able to say objectively, this is what I think is going on. Underneath all of that, here's what I see. And so I'm a huge proponent of getting a therapist, everybody. It is so hard to ask for help. When you're used to being the one who's the doer and everybody comes to for help, especially as a therapist, everybody comes to us. So who do we go to? Or so we think, but we're still human. But that goes back to that trust. You have to be able to trust other people. You have to be able to trust somebody. But that's another thing I was talking to somebody about this morning that I see that's very common among us. Hold on 1 minute. Get some water. We have a lot of trust issues, especially when it comes to our money. We're very, skeptical of everything that involves money, oftentimes. Us really smart people, I consider myself, relatively smart. I will overanalyze anything that requires money. And I think that has a lot to do with my childhood, not having money and not learning how to spend it and how to use it as a resource, and then having to feel like, if I get it, it may quickly leave me. So I need to hold on to it versus actually spending it. There's a lot of mentality and psychology that goes behind the way we use our money. But I think it's a whole nother level of trust when there's actually something that's really good for you that's going to help you, but you can't see it because you're talking yourself out of it. Anybody else guilty of that? I talked myself, the coach that I'm working with right now, and hopefully she'll see this video, but I talked myself out of working with her for a whole year. A whole year. And I was telling somebody this morning it was because I was insecure. That's all it was. Now that because I was asking myself the other day, now why the heck did I do that? Like, that was stupid. And now the thoughts that I had before absolutely make no sense because they weren't logical. They were all emotional and completely from a place of insecurity and fear, right? But ask yourself, when you're talking yourself out of something, and catch yourself. That's the first step, being able to catch yourself. Somebody is presenting some information to you and it's new, and you're like, oh, no, disregarding this, think, that maybe they're onto something. Maybe they know something that I don't know. It's possible, But your insecurities will tell you, no, let's just cling on to the things that we know. Let's stay in the comfort zone and stay with the familiar, right? And that's a trust issue. It's a trust issue. You got to be able to trust yourself and wisely trust others. I'm not saying go out there and, risk it all with everybody. But, once somebody has proven themselves trustworthy, trust them. Take some time, listen to yourself, trust yourself, and then be able to acknowledge why you feel or think the way you do. Ask yourself questions. That's what I do now. I check things out with people that I trust, and then I ask myself questions like, okay, what's this really about? And then I go ask my therapist, what do you think this is about? This is what I think it's about. Do you agree? So I know this is pretty long for today. Again, please share this out. I think this message is so needed for so many people. So feel free to share. You can hit the share button, copy and paste it to your page or to another group that you're in. For anybody that you feel like this could really help just in their personal or professional lives, because I think that it's time for all of us to step into our calling. But there are so many challenges and barriers to that we have to overcome. And these 3 things are huge barriers that if we don't acknowledge them, they will continue to limit our power They will continue to limit our abilities and our creativities and all the things that we have inside of us, all the gifts that we are born with. And I always tell people, don't leave your $1 million gift on the shelf. Like, it's meant to be shared and to be delivered to the world, right? To be seen, to be displayed, and to be experienced. So that's all I have for now. Please share this video with anyone that you think it would be helpful to. Again, this is not therapy. This is just education. If you feel like any of these things are an issue for you, or that you want to expand on them with a professional, I highly encourage seeing a therapist. It's done wonders for me. And I don't think that my life would be where it is today. I would not be the founder of an organization with an online community of 15,000 people had I not overcome my fears and my insecurities, or at least acknowledge them, right? Because it's a lifelong journey. Life is a lifelong journey of learning. That's what I always tell people. But you can't learn from the things that you're running and hiding from. So that's all I have for you today. Please also feel free to follow and like this page so that you will be notified anytime I'm sharing a video or a post. And I look forward to hearing from you all in the future. All right, take care.